Thank you for being here, and thank you for following this new talk. Yesterday, we talked about how to build things and to handle the build pipeline, and to improve your developer experience. The fact is, when you are working on a new application, you do have to focus more and more, because we were doing still web apps and web applications, and more application in a large sense, because we can address mobile devices and browsers and desktop devices and so on. So we do need to have a consistent experience, to build a consistent experience for all our end users. So our developers, as developers, we are working with our designers friends, and our designers focused on user experience for a while. And to improve it, they are starting to build a lot of tools and a lot of concept, like the design systems. The fact is, there is a lot of designer resources online that are oriented for our friends as designers, how to build a design system, or to create it step by step. What is a comprehensive design system? There's a lot of resources at Adobe websites and Adobe blogs, but I cannot find that much developer-oriented resources, because this is not that easy to build a design system as a developer from scratch. Because when we just receive the interfaces and the Figma stuff and so on, we are just sometimes lost in what they're supposed to do, how I am supposed to implement them, and how can I share them with my coworkers and my teammates, and how I can improve my whole experience as a developer and for the rest of my team. So let's talk a bit about atomic design. That was a system, a concept that was invented in the past, probably something like 10 years ago, and designers and developers as well are focusing on this concept as atomic design, because this is probably the best one we can handle in terms of design system development. So first, what a design system is from a developer perspective. First thing, it's a collection of design tokens. The design tokens are the foundation of your brand. They are the overall definitions, like the colors, the typography, the font files, the logo, the kind of illustrations, the icons that you want to use, and so on. They are definitely what make your brands unique. And this is what your designers friends are giving to you from your Figma stuff and so on. But it's also a design kit, something like a UI kit that is a pattern or a set of components that you could use in your final application. And this design kit is giving from the designer part to like a collection of different variations of buttons, of input fields, of accordions, something like that. The basic blocks that you want to use when you want to build an overall interface. It's also a components library. This is a direct implementation of your UI kit. And this is exactly what we want to use as developers to implement the interface that are given from the designer's side. But it's also a dynamic documentation, something where you can explicitly say what a component is, or to use it, or to implement it, or to interact with it, and how your final users will use it in the final views and the final interface. So from a developer perspective, a design system is those four items: design tokens, design kit, components library, and a dynamic documentation. And this is your responsibility as developers to implement all of those four items. So the design system is firstly here to help your product team to build a better software for your customers, but it's also a big tool that we use internally to help the communication between product teams, developers, and designers. So about atomic design, this is a concept from Brad Frost 10 years ago, as I said, and it started with a split of your the definition of your interface. In the first implementation of atomic design, Brad said that there are 5 types. You are first atoms, then with atoms you build molecules and organisms, and you have templates and pages that you can iterate. I will going through them just after that, but keep in mind that this you are going from the little ones to the biggest one, and this is the best way to scale your overall interface and your overall application, just because you are starting from the smallest one and going to the largest one. So from our side at DevRiot, we're focusing on design system, and as I said, we're focusing on the 4 components: design tokens, and from the design tokens, we just deliver the 3 all other parts: the design kit from the designer side, the component library for the developers, the documentation site that will improve the communication between designers and developers and the product team. So this is the best way to do it. And everything starts with the design tokens. And if developers are not necessarily able to well design things, I'm not a really good designer. I'm a better developer than a designer. But as a developer, I know how to name things. And this is exactly what we have to do when we want to define the overall application. The idea is that we want to build components that are both reusable, and I will be able to use and reuse my component in my application. I want them to be testable in unit test and in an isolated way to just test my components and see how they work. We want them to be customizable, to be able to be adapted to our brand from our design tokens. And we want them to be collaborative, to be able to have everyone in the team, design, product, or developers, to work together on this final components. So what we want is just to make shareable definitions of our components. So let's see how to implement them the right way. First, we start with our atoms in the atomic design definition. Finally, your atoms are your design tokens. Here, this is the screenshot of the Backlight interface. Backlight is a tool that we are building at DevRiot that helps developers to build design systems. So you have a section with your design token. Design tokens are just definitions in a common format of the different elements that we use and reuse as variables in your components. They could be font definitions, colors definition, font size, and so on. This is, once again, exactly what makes your brand unique. So you extract directly those contents and those variables from the Figma definitions files or the sketch files or so on, given from the designers directly. The idea behind the hood of that is that we want to work on a common standard format. Actually, we do not have a common standard format, but there is a community working group at the W3C, the design token community group, that are working on a common standard format, common standard definition that will probably be something inspired from YAML or something like that. And with it, you could style once and use everywhere. And this is exactly the premise of the style dictionary library. Style dictionary is the things that we are using under the hood at Backlight. It's an adaptation of it. But the idea is that you just define in the format that you prefer. It could be YAML, could be JSON, could be whatever you want, to define your different variables and different values associated to those variables. And you are ready to use them everywhere in your application. The fun thing is that you could directly import them from any kind of designer tool, and you could export them to a different platform in a JSON format to be ready to be used in JavaScript or to iOS or to Android and so on. This is the promise from the design token community group, having a standard format that we will be able to use in the developer tools and in the designer tools too. So we could define the design token once and use them in every kind of tools in our workflow, from designers, from the product, from the developers, everyone are using the same formats and the same definition of design tokens. Then you will be able to use those tokens directly in your application and your components. So molecules in the atomic design system are exactly how you are composing your application from your tokens. Here we just define some buttons, and those buttons are directly imported from the Chakra UI library. And we just have to pass the definition of the tokens to the different components, and everything is styled and everything is branded accordingly to your design and to your specification coming from the designer side. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel and to redevelop everything. Just have to pass the correct values and the correct tokens to starting to build molecules that are advanced components ready to be used in your final interfaces. And as I said, we want to document things the right way. So to do that, we want this documentation to be dynamic. So we are focusing on advanced version of Markdown, like Markdown-X or Markdown.js or so on. And with it, we can directly import our components, our molecules that we want to document, and we want to explain how they work in a playground that is able in the documentation, in the preview, and you are able to see how to use your component like a storybook and how to improve it and so on. So same thing, we use and reuse the components everywhere. We developed it once and we reuse it in the documentation, in the interface, in the final product, everything. So finally, we are just creating our own toolkit, and we want to be able to distribute this toolkit to everyone that will use it after: designers, developers, product owners, and so on. So how to use and reuse it and reuse those components and those definitions in your final product. We are now focusing on organisms in the atomic design definition. So organism is just an aggregate of different components. So you don't repeat your own interface, you are just reusing your components everywhere. Here is just a simple definition like a hero in our web page. And this is just a combination of different atoms, colors from definitions, and so on. We've got buttons that are molecules. We've got links that are molecules too. And we grab it and we just aggregate it to build an advanced organism. So an advanced component that is ready to be reused everywhere in our application, our landing page, our splash screen in the mobile device or the mobile application, or in the desktop too, and so on. So just develop once and use everywhere. This is also a part of your design system, and you will be ready to distribute those advanced components everywhere after that. So we want to externalize all the commands element, but we also have elements that will need to be customized in the application itself, because they are grabbing data and adapting the content and adapting the result to the data. So we are building templates that will be hydrated and with some kind of data. And finally, templates are just organisms, so advanced components with different slots that are ready to be hydrated with kind of data, like, I don't know, cards, carousels, fact entries, and so on. So you could develop advanced organisms with different placeholders, different slots that are ready to be hydrated at some point in your final applications. And those templates are also part of your design system. This is just the advanced version of an organism, and that's all. So after that, you will be ready to finally share your stack, your design system with the rest of your stack. First, you have to focus on the library mode. So everything is distributed in a package, and every component will be ready to be imported and used in every part of our application. We will be ready from the design system package to import the tokens directly if we have to use them in the final application, and to import the components and the molecules, the organisms, and so on. So each time a designer needs to improve some part of the application, he probably will just have to change some content in the design tokens definition, and everything will cascade through every part of your design system, then to your final application to be ready to be distributed. The big advantage of that is that each time you have a modification, your design system will immediately reflect it, and you will have the result re-render in your final rendering previews of your design system. So you will be able to detect any regression or any change that will not be that useful or that efficient in your final application before pushing everything in the dev stack and having some kind of issues to resolve just because we have changed font definition of something like that is finally broke some kind of button fields preview or I don't know. The other advantage is that we can target multiple platforms with that, just because we are building an agnostic package with definition of your components, focusing on your framework, but coming from the same design tokens definition. So we can focus the web platform, but we can also focus some kind of non-web platform like iOS, Android, or whatever you want. We just have to reuse the same definition tokens and probably the same components that we could export after that to native, like with React Native, or I don't know. So this is really handy when you want to collaborate with different teams that are working on different platforms, but are all using the same definition from the ground. So designers of high-level tools like Figma or Sketch or whatever you already know about them, and their ecosystem is growing fast. And our ecosystem, from the developer perspective, is also going really fast and growing in many directions. But we need advanced tools to work on the design system part the same way than the designers, because don't ever forget that developers are just users like you, and we need a big improved developer experience, and we don't have to build everything with just a code editor, and we need advanced tools to work on those design system definitions too. Thank you very much. I'm Mads, working at Div Riot, and I'm here for any question if you have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a really nice talk.
Thanks.
Yeah, anytime. You did all the work. I'm just here for the congratulations. So we're right now waiting on any questions. Is there anything else you would like to say, or anyone in the chat also has any questions? There's an awkward silence happening.
Yeah, I can break the silence.
Stream.
Hi. It's the organizer here. So because there are no questions from YouTube, I have to invent some questions. So I was working on this stuff, I don't know, like 1 year ago. Then I figured that what I need user interface definition, then I need styling solution, and then I need like something for state management. And all of this has to be in single markup. So I have one definition where I can declare state, styling, markup like structure and components. And then I built this system, and it's JSON based. So what do you think of, like, do you see that the future of design systems or this kind of development is that we push everything to some common format, like some JSON with schema that then we generate from the JSON for different targets? Or where do you see things are going?
Yeah, I see. I guess this is exactly the future of the design systems, just working on externalized definitions of the different design tokens, just because with the design token community group, we are trying to focus on something that will be ready to be used both by designers and developers. And finally, having a simple format like, I don't know, a YAML definition or a JSON definition is something that is really easy to edit as developers with a simple code editor, but it's also a simple format that will be easy to author with a dedicated design editor if designers don't want to edit the code by themselves. And it's also easy to export it to whatever you want. And seeing some things like the vanilla extract project from Magdalene, which is really, really good, because it definitely solved the problem from CSS modules by exporting any tokens in CSS variables scoped to the components or globally to the application. This is a good step in the direction of having the definition externalized and just generated to the CSS variables, ready to be used in the styling process after in our components or something like that. So yeah, this is, I guess this is definitely the future. We really do need to externalize everything related to the design and to the brand, and just focus on how to use those components, those values in our components, whatever they are.
Yeah, I think I have to share my prototype with you later so you can have a look, because I think it sort of makes sense, because it's easy to target with tools, and it's easy to generate some HTML or whatever from the definition. That's like the meta thing in the between.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
I think like one of the main aspects is also the communication part, right? Because like as part of NX, for instance, like we are involved like in a lot of like also setup of design systems, but more like we support it more from the tooling perspective. But I see like what people struggle with usually, right? And it's always that kind of the designer side and the developer side, right? And that tool in the middle is kind of missing sometimes. And recently at one of the clients which we follow along with, like they also started going more in the direction of like having like design tokens and style dictionary, like a common shared language basically, where they could basically talk through that with the designers and the developers. There was no code editor in the middle, right? Yeah. Like both could use their tools, but still like be in sync without having to manually like check whenever someone changed one. And that is really a game changer, I think. So I really like to talk, because like you really like captured those points that are most important like in that process. So.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely agree. Like we have, it's the communication part. I think that in the end always ends up being the hardest part between developers and designers, and you need a common language. And I think that in the end, anyone can edit a JSON if we teach them to, but like no one should be forced to learn how to code, or no one should be forced to learn how to design. But we can find ways to make people edit JSONs, and I think that everything should just be. Honestly, in my opinion, everything should just be a fucking JSON. I think everything should just be a JSON. That's my opinion. I think JSON solves so many problems. It's like everything can be a JSON. It's like, if you think about it, MongoDB is just a fancy thing on the cloud. And so is local storage, but in your computer. I'm super in for transforming any JavaScript file into a JSON file. It's my thing. I like it. Love it. 10 out of 10.
Absolutely.
Good talk.
Thanks.
Great talk.
Yeah, great talk. So if no one has any more questions,
I have. He likes JSON. So
of course he does. It's the greatest invention of web development. I'm not even kidding right now.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, the only problem is that it's difficult to put comments into JSON. I mean, you can do it, but it's not nice.
Oh, there's JSON 5 now. It's not very well supported.
Yeah, JSON 5, but you cannot use it to package JSON. And that's where you want to put comments to explain people what you did. But yeah, to get back to the question, I wanted to ask if you wanted to learn more about design systems or get more into the topic, how would you get started? Where would you go, or what would you study? Do you read design books, or what should you read or study to get more into the topic?
If you want to go more deeply into the design system topics, there is a lot of resources on the web from the designer part. So, but it could be useful just to understand what it is and how does it work and so on. And from the developer side, just I would say going my advocacy job, but use Backlight. Try Backlight. It's a free tool. Just start a project in it. We've got a lot of templates that are ready to be used with different technologies, not only React, but also focusing on Svelte or Vue or whatever you want. And those templates are really nice to just understand how you could figure a design system from a developer side. Just have to clone the start from a template, change some value, see how it interacts with the rest of the components, and it is really useful just to understand by and learn by doing. Just this is the best way to do it.
So one thing I noticed that, I mean, we are software developers, of course, but it's not like we are not the only people designing something. So we can actually learn a lot from architects. And there's a famous architect called Christopher Alexander, and he wrote this book called, I think it's A Pattern Language. So it was one of the books when I was in the university, I had to study this book in the architecture course. But I think some of these ideas from architecture or other fields, they somehow map to what we're doing, because we're finding patterns and modeling things and like figuring out what things are, so that we can share them and reuse solutions we found that work in certain cases. So just as a side note, that sometimes it's worth looking outside of software development.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.